China's largest military parade to mark the 80th anniversary of the end of the Second World War was a military, strategic and diplomatic show of strength. From the DF-16 intercontinental ballistic missile, from the DF-61 ICBMs with MIRV or multiple independently targetable re-entry vehicles to the robotic dogs, from the counter-drone systems to undersea drones, including the AJX-002, that 60 feet long underwater stealth drone, to the HQ-29 space defense system, a missile aimed to bring down an enemy satellite. China's signal to the world was they've arrived on the world stage, closing the gap with the United States of America. There are some who say when it comes to technology, China may just be a step ahead in some aspects. There were several world leaders on the stage with the Chinese president, from the Russian President Vladimir Putin to the North Korean Supreme Leader Kim Jong-un. What was also interesting, Robert Fico, the Prime Minister of Slovakia. Incidentally, Slovakia is a member of both the European Union and the North Atlantic Treaty Organization. He also was on stage. We get you more in this report. China's largest military parade ever at the Tiananmen Square. A showcase of power that sent a strong message to the world.
26 helicopters form huge numerical shapes of 8 and 0.
Overhead, helicopters form the number 80, marking 80 years of the end of the Second World War.
Let's begin.
President Xi Jinping, wearing a Mao-style suit, inspected the parade from an open-roof red flag limousine, declaring China's rise was unstoppable.
The Chinese nation is a great nation that does not fear violence, and that stands independent and strong. In the past, when confronted with a life or death struggle between justice and evil, light and darkness, progress and reaction, the Chinese people stood united, rose up in resistance, and fought for the survival of the country, the rejuvenation of the nation, and the cause of human justice.
China unveiled for the first time its nuclear triad, the Dongfeng 5C intercontinental ballistic missile, capable of striking almost across the world. Next, the DF-61 mobile ICBM, and then the JL-3 submarine-launched missile. China also displayed its hypersonic anti-ship missiles, tested against the US carrier mock-ups, called the carrier killers. China also showcased its HQ-29 anti-satellite missile. For the first time, 5 variants of the stealth J-20 and the J-35 fighter jets appeared together. This included the twin-seater J-20S. And then there was a swarm of unmanned systems and stealth drones, giant submarine drones, and the robotic dogs designed for combat support. China's Navy also unveiled the KJ-600 early warning aircraft, a major boost to the carrier's strike power. More than 10,000 PLA troops marched in tight formations, showcasing discipline and China's military might. President Xi Jinping was joined on the podium by Russia's President Vladimir Putin and North Korea's Supreme Leader Kim Jong-un, the striking image of 3 adversaries of the United States standing together. From Washington, D.C., US President Donald Trump hit out at the parade, calling it a conspiracy against the United States. The parade was as much about remembrance of war glory as it was about signaling China's place in the new world order. Bureau Report, India Today. And across the Pacific Ocean, US President Donald Trump is in the line of fire back home in the States and in parts of Europe. Edward Price, a senior US analyst and professor at the New York University, said US needs to remove the 50% tariff on India and get it down to something far more reasonable. His suggestion is 0% and also apologize to India. US Congressman Ro Khanna said tariffs are driving India closer to China and Russia and that the US cannot allow Donald Trump's ego to destroy a strategic relationship with India that's key to ensuring America leads and not China. We get you more in this report.
Prime Minister Modi's SCO power play has sent shockwaves in Washington. Modi shook hands with Putin and stood alongside Xi. And Donald Trump is losing his cool. The three leaders projected a new multipolar global order. But back in the US, Trump saw red. Under fire at home for slapping 50% tariffs on India, Trump is railing against India.
India was charging us tremendous tariffs, about the highest in the world. They were about the highest in the world, number one. But we would not send in anything because they were charging us 100% tariffs. And, you know, I'll give you an example, Harley-Davidson. Harley-Davidson couldn't sell into India. There was a 200% tariff on a motorcycle. So what happens? Harley-Davidson went to India and built a motorcycle plant. And now they don't have to pay tariffs.
But top American policymakers themselves are now questioning Trump's move. Ex-US NSA John Bolton accused Trump of destroying India-US ties, while retired US General Jack Keane said the disastrous tariffs have only shoved India closer to Russia. US experts say Trump's tariff ride is off track. Tariffs are hurting America more than India.
He has imposed a 50% tariff on India, higher than any other country other than Brazil. It's a higher tariff than the tariff on China. It is hurting India's exports of leather and textiles into the United States, and it's hurting American manufacturers and our exports into India. It is also driving India towards China and towards Russia.
India has the deciding vote in the 21st century. If India chooses the US versus China, or if India sits out of any US-China competition, it will effectively decide the outcome. So India is a super, super important player in the 21st century. It's only going to get more powerful. So I think the number one thing that we could do of two is remove that 50% tariff and get it down to something far more reasonable. I suggest 0%. And the second thing we can do is apologize.
Meanwhile, Commerce Minister Piyush Goyal says New Delhi won't buckle.
We have reached a very advanced stage in our FTA with the European Union. Commerce Secretary, as we speak, is in meetings in Brussels with his counterpart, the DG of EU. We are making very active and significant progress. In terms of the Eurasian FTA, we have finalized the terms of reference. Now we'll set up the next steps and dates to start discussing.
Trump may rail and rant, but for India, the message is clear. No deals under pressure and no compromise on national interest. Bureau Report, India Today.
So a 70-minute long show of strength, show of military strength, diplomatic strength, and strategic power. Will the US President Donald Trump read the writing on the China wall? Joining me on this India Today special broadcast is Ambassador Ajay Malhotra, former Indian ambassador to Russia. Lieutenant General E.S.L. Narasimhan is former member of the National Security Advisory Board, former defense attaché to China. Sandeep Unnithan is a senior journalist who has been watching this parade very closely and all the Chinese military hardware. Professor Andrew Latham is a distinguished scholar of international security studies and political economy. But I first want to cut across to Edward Price, adjunct professor at Center for Global Affairs and a senior fellow at the New York University. Professor Price, welcome. What, according to you, was the biggest signal from this 70-minute, or will India have to ride out the storm for the rest of the Trump tenure?
Well, look, this is about carrots and sticks. And in my opinion, the worst thing that the US can do with India is to use the stick. Because, of course, for all sorts of reasons, including historic reasons, including strategic reasons, India is not going to respond well to the threat of a stick. Instead, it should be the carrot. These two great democracies should talk to each other about how we work together, how we trade more, not less, and really get on the same page about the values that we do share, effectively, as I say, democracy. So for my money, look, it's very simple. The US needs to change its approach. I said 0% tariff, maybe that was hyperbolic, but zero would be far, far preferable to 50%, which is an act of economic vandalism.
And yet, we see a very tense situation, though there are some in India, including the Commerce Minister, who said perhaps by November we should have a trade deal in place or words to that effect. But is trust broken between India and the US, and can that situation be salvaged?
I think the situation can be salvaged. I think that India is going to do whatever is in India's interest. By the way, that's how India always does geopolitics. It's always pretty smart. It doesn't necessarily throw in its power with any one side or another. And I think that there are reasons that the Indians and the Americans and the West more broadly should get on. But that's for India to determine. And all I can say as a US citizen, as a member of the West, is that we, the West, we, the Americans, are going around this the wrong way. And at some point in the future, after Donald Trump, hopefully there will be a more sensible individual in the White House, and that individual will be able to sit down with Modi or whoever it is running India and patch things up. That's my hope.
Okay, so that's very interesting. After Donald Trump, so the indications are this relationship will not return on an even keel as long as Donald Trump is in the White House.
Well, let me put a caveat on that. Donald Trump can be in the White House and we can still have better relations. It probably comes down to the midterm elections, which are a little over 400 days away in the United States. And if the midterm elections give Donald Trump a slap on the wrist, if effectively the Democratic Party can wrest control of the Congress, or if different Republicans, Republicans that are willing to stand up to his autocratic behavior, if those Republicans and Democrats get together in Congress and tell Donald Trump, look, no more of this nonsense, perhaps they can wrest back control of tariff policy, which, by the way, according to the Founding Fathers, was the power of the Congress, not the president. So I'm hopeful that the Congress, if it gets its act together, can repair the relationship between the US and India and the US and other countries before Trump leaves. If it can't, I'm afraid it's 3.5 years of chaos.
Okay. Edward Price, for joining me here on India Today. Many thanks. I now want to throw this open for a wider discussion. With me on this special broadcast, General Narasimhan, your assessment of the military might showcased by China. Has Beijing successfully reduced the gap, closed the gap, the strategic gap with Washington, D.C.? Or do you agree with Professor Price? He just seemed to indicate there's a big difference between military parades and warfighting capabilities on ground.
Yes and no. Thanks for inviting me on the show, Gaurav, and it has always been a pleasure to discuss these things with you. Today's military parade threw up some new issues which we need to be looking into. Firstly, there is a shift towards a joint kind of warfare, which you can see there, because the kind of equipment that got displayed here actually shows an improvement in the joint warfare capability of China. That is number 1 point. 2, there are some new equipment that was displayed today, like DF-61, and also the kind of unmanned system that they actually projected here, unmanned aircraft, unmanned drones, and unmanned underwater vehicles. This is something which is actually getting into a new domain of warfare, and that is something which we need to take into account. The other one is the loyal wingman drone that they displayed today, which is again a very important thing where it comes to the what we call as MUM team, man unmanned teams. That is something which is going to be the future, and they seem to be already moving on that. So while these things may not have been tested on ground, but the capability exists, and we need to take it at that value and then work on that particular kind of capability that Chinese have.
Fair enough. Sandeep, the triad, the capability to deliver nuclear weapons, air, land, sea, and underwater. Your take, Sandeep, because, we saw this 70-minute long parade. This was a total show of strength by the People's Liberation Army, by China.
Absolutely, Gaurav. And the first thing that hit me when I saw that parade this morning was what China is trying to convey to the world and indeed to the United States. It is deterrence across domains. And, all of this triad business that's been put out there, for the first time, you're seeing missiles like an air-launched ballistic missile, the JL-1, for instance. That's China's first aeroballistic nuclear-tipped missile that was displayed there. You've seen several series of Dongfeng long-range intercontinental ballistic missiles with MIRV capabilities. You're seeing hypersonic missiles. All of this points to China telling the United States that it's all about deterrence. So it is like what we were in the Soviet Union and the United States, the confrontation during the Cold War. And we are looking at a new kind of Cold War as developing now, with China having finally arrived and becoming what the Soviet Union was not quite with the United States. It's an economic power, and it's a military power as well. That's what China is literally signaling with this massive parade, Gaurav. The fact is that it is trying to show deterrence with that range of intercontinental ballistic missiles. It is telling the United States that we can checkmate you at every step, whether it is through the first island chain, across domains, underwater, space, long range.
Also one that is not a camp follower of anyone, and not aspiring to be a junior ally or junior partner to anyone. Not USA, not Russia, not China. And I think that is part of the appreciation that the world should have when looking at India's participation in this meeting. As regards tariffs, let's see. There have been reports that Russia may be interested in picking up some of the items which could not be sold on, or which were planned to be sold to the Americans, but due to the high tariffs will not be, worthwhile sending there. But I think there would be many other opportunities. I don't think that would be the primary focus. There would be many other opportunities which we are exploring. In the previous segment, I heard, for example, the free trade areas that we're exploring with other countries, and that's the right way to proceed. All these things will also pass, later on when we look back. These tariff differences have been there for a long time, especially when Republican administrations have been there. And I would venture that even when Trump goes, you may still have some of this, because they do use tariffs as a weapon to pry open markets. Whereas with the Democrat administrations, it was always child labor, bonded labor, workers' rights, environmental conditionalities. The Republicans are not interested in those matters to a large extent. The only difference is now it is being done in the public eye, because you have Trump, who puts out these messages out there in social media, and that causes certain concerns which are not easy to address in a public setting. But I'm sure we'll find the solutions to this. And I agree with one of the previous speakers who said what happens in the elections to the US Congress will determine also to what extent and how this moves forward. And let's see where we go. But there's no reason for us to feel bullied by the Americans. That is simply not going to happen.
So, Professor Latham, that's a message that's gone out loud and clear from India. There is no way that India will be bullied by anyone, and let alone someone we've considered a very close, comprehensive, strategic partner. But how would US be reacting to this military parade? And I want you to see those images of the Dongfeng 61s and the unmanned systems and the undersea equipment that China put out on display, Professor Latham. And, what do you make of President Trump saying words to the effect that, my best wishes to...
be your, running dog, or we won't be your junior ally or camp follower. And I think once that understanding seeps in, appreciation of positions of both sides, then you can find better solutions. And I do believe it is eminently possible.
Okay, because Sandeep, as Ambassador Malhotra was pointing out, it's quite alarming for a cryptocurrency deal with Pakistan. President Trump, for a personal or a family deal, he can throw out 25 years of strategic partnership out of the window. It would just show that they're really not very reliable partners. But I'll come to America in just a bit, Sandeep. I want to come back to that military parade at the Tiananmen Square. Because Operation Sindoor, Sandeep, we saw the capabilities of Chinese low Earth orbiting satellites, their real-time intelligence given to Pakistan, the PL-15s, air-to-air missiles, the J-10Cs, the JF-17s, the Honky 9s, the HQ-16 radars. But by the 10th May morning, India had punched holes across Pakistani air defense, bombed 9 terror camps, including Muridke and Bahawalpur, 11 air bases, 6 radars. So, the difference that, you remember Professor Price and Andrew Latham both seem to indicate, the difference between parade weapons and weapons of war.
Absolutely, Gaurav. And, I think the Chinese military-industrial complex would have been extremely disappointed with what happened on the 10th of May. I'm sure they might have been overjoyed on the 7th of May for what happened, the reverses that we suffered. But by the 10th of May, it was very clear that all the missiles, all the radars, all the data links, all the long-range missiles, all of that would not do anything to prevent Pakistan getting the beating that it did in that short span of time. In less than 30 minutes, we had basically forced the PAF away from the frontline air bases. And these air bases, Gaurav, as you know, are where they special weapon storage sites as well. And they had to run into their depth bases. They had to vacate their frontline air bases. Their air defense shields were shattered. And it is a kind of one of those situations which they had completely not expected. It was an out-of-syllabus question, if you can call it that, and they had no answer to that. So the Chinese military-industrial complex, Gaurav, has taken a beating in Op Sindoor, and we've seen the kind of propaganda that was put out to target Indian weapons, to target Western weapons that were used by us, by the Chinese military-industrial complex. But of course, Operation Sindoor kind of, has raised question marks about the effectiveness, the efficacy of many of these tactical weapons that the Chinese have sold to the Pakistanis, Gaurav.
General Narasimhan, would you like to weigh in? Because the kind of weapons the Chinese had sold the Pakistanis, the HQ-16s and the HQ-9s, after what India did in Balakot, so that entire air defense shield, India was able to punch holes in it and bomb where we wanted, when we wanted, how we wanted. In the light of that, or are we to think because Pakistan doesn't really pay good money, they don't get the best equipment?
The thing I think we need to look at is the kind of equipment that Pakistan has got from the Chinese. There have been issues with that. Like, for example, the
monitoring and seeing how does the weapon system of the other side perform on both sides. And that helps you then gauge what else you need to do. A thing like this parade gives you a peep into what a country, and in this case, a country with which we have some issues, might be up to. And I think it is incumbent on the Indian authorities now, in the interest of the Indian citizen, to take...
Ambassador Malhotra, the last 30 seconds I have on this part of the show, there's a question that was repeatedly asked, by friends from China and Russia about RIC. From the times, if I remember correctly, from Premier Primakov to current Foreign Minister Sergei Lavrov, the conversation around RIC, Russia, India, China, trilateral, is gaining ground. You've been our ambassador to Russia. Your appreciation of RIC, is it Is it an idea whose time has now come, or that's clearly not happening? This was just a handshake, and this is not something that India is very keen to move forward on.
I wouldn't exaggerate its importance. RIC has never really had a standalone summit meeting. Whenever they have met, and they've met twice in more recent times, 2018, 2019, it has always been on the sidelines of other multilateral conferences. Yes, it is good for us on some issues to talk with these two countries, and we do so at the foreign minister level, and all three countries believe that that's probably the right level at which to keep it. So I don't see, even up here, if you saw, and I pointed it out, it wasn't a sit-down sort of a meeting of the three, which would be something that might cause more concern to others. But it was to show that, look, there are possibilities out there, and if there's anyone looking to harm any of these three countries, they need to think about it. I would leave it at this moment for that. Under BRICS, you probably have much more to do. Again, that is in the economic context.
Yes.
But even that is expanding its purview. So it probably, with a wider phalanx, it probably does a better job. But again, it's not political and it's not an alliance. Very often you read BRIC alliance, BRICS alliance. These are not alliances. No, it's SCO.
Okay.
We will never be in alliance with China, given the situation that persists on our border and the differences we have at the moment.
Absolutely. Gentlemen, many thanks for joining me. This is a conversation. I'd love to have a longer conversation with you on this, but there's breaking news that's coming in. It's a big India Today exclusive. In an exclusive conversation with India Today, Germany's foreign minister has said Donald Trump is using tariffs as a tool to finance the American budget. The German foreign minister said that the Trump administration will be using similar tools in future as well, and the world needs to be prepared for the future. Now, India Today had reported that the US is now putting pressure on the European Union to put sanctions on India, similar to the US tariffs. But German foreign minister has made one thing very clear. The European Union will not put pressure on India. There will not be any sanctions. Listen in to this exclusive conversation. My colleague Geeta Mohan gets us more.
Tariff war and President Trump and how he looks at and views at tariffs and weaponizing tariffs. How do you see it?
I don't think that this will end with the situation we are now in. We have to expect that these tools will be used by the American administration further on. So we have to prepare us for the future. We are not in favor of putting tariffs between countries and between markets, but to make it easier to have trade between countries.
We'll talk about the long war, but are you telling me, Minister Wonderful, that this is a long economic war also that the world will be dealing with, that it's not going to end anytime soon?
I wouldn't say it's a war, but it is a specific tool this president is using in the end of the day to finance his own budget.
India's feeling the pressure, the economic pressure of sanctions. I would call them sanctions because secondary tariffs amount to economic sanctions. Is Germany feeling US pressure to sanction India, as many other European countries are?
No, we're not.
Okay, so there's a big parade. At the Beijing's parade, there was a hot mic moment between President Xi Jinping and the Russian President Vladimir Putin. King Jong-un was also there, and that hot mic moment has gone viral. So the three strongmen were caught talking about not war, not challenging the United States of America, but longevity, biotech, and how to live long. Listen in.
发展，人类的器官会不断的移植，甚至越活越年轻，甚至会长生不老。生物技术的发展，人类的器官会不断的移植，甚至越活越年轻，甚至会长生不老。